When I first started bass fishing, I quickly learned about the wonders of the underwater snag. It didn't seem to matter if it was vegetation, sticks, rocks, boat dock cables. I got my lures stuck on all of them, and it cost me a lot of money. So one day when my fishing mentor asked me how often I'm throwing a crankbait, I probably responded, that lure that has 2 treble hooks and touches the bottom during the whole cast, no thanks, I get snagged way too much. But over the years, I have learned 3 key things about fishing crankbaits, especially in ponds, that if applied correctly, I believe can help you catch way more fish and snag a whole lot less. My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all. I can't believe what I just caught. Yes! Today's video is brought to you by Bass Forecast. More on them to come later in the video. Now, the first thing I want to say is that this video is catered to the bank fishermen, the guys that are bank fishing ponds, rivers, and big bodies of water, because I believe that fishing a crankbait from the bank is far different and, of course, is much harder to get your lures unstuck than from a boat or a kayak. And so this video it can apply to guys in a boat. Of course, these tips apply to everybody, but I'm really catering it towards you guys from the bank. So tip number 1 when fishing a crankbait from the bank is that you first have to have a really good understanding as to the bottom composition and the structure and cover that's down there in all your ponds so you can pick the right crankbait. This first pond you see on the screen has a ton of underwater vegetation in it. This second pond, well, it's not quite a pond really, it's more of a bank fishing situation on a large body of water, but it has tons of hard cover. It's got boat dock pilings, it's got cables and ropes, and it's got tons of just kind of trash metal and pieces of boats that have fallen into the water and settled on the bottom. This third pond, even though you can't see it with your naked eye, has lots of underwater snags like big laydown trees, cables, and water pipes for lawn irrigation. And lastly, this pond is exactly what it looks like, featureless both above and below the water, with the bottom composition consisting of basically mud, sand, and silt. Now, I showed those 4 ponds to help you have an understanding that most ponds out there have some kind of what I call snaggy underwater structure to them, and if you don't, that is great. You can pick practically any crankbait you want, fish it anywhere you want, relatively snagless, but for the rest of us, we have to actually think about the smartest crankbait choice for our ponds. But what actually is the correct crankbait to choose? And that brings us to tip number 2. And that all boils down to exactly what type of underwater structure and cover you have to help you select the right crankbait. Is most of the underwater structure in your pond aquatic vegetation? Well, then the lipless crankbait is going to be your best choice. This style of crankbait sinks in the water, which makes it super versatile, and you can fish it in any water depth. So you want to cast it in 20 feet? Great. You want to cast it in 2 feet? Great. And one of the techniques you can use with a lipless crankbait around grass is what I call worming it. And all that means is that you are using a crankbait, even with 2 treble hooks, in a similar situation as you would a soft plastic worm. You're casting it out there, you are getting it down near the bottom, and then you retrieve it over that grass, speeding it up if you know you're getting to a really grassy, higher section where the grass reaches higher in the water column. And then once you pass that section, maybe pop it out of the grass, you slow it back down over the holes and open areas, just like you would a soft plastic worm. Now, is it harder than a Texas rigged weedless soft plastic worm? Of course it is, but you can still do that effectively with a lipless crankbait with a little bit of practice. And when you inevitably get your lipless crankbait stuck in the aquatic vegetation, the grass, the weeds, whatever you call it, it is totally possible to get your lure back, unless you're throwing like super thin line, 8-10 pound line, and you go to snap or pull the crankbait, your line can break. But I throw a lipless crankbait usually on 12 to 17 pound line, and so in that case, getting it snagged in the grass and having to pull it back to you with a giant lob of grass on there may ruin your cast, but at least you have your lure back. Now, on the flip side, is most of the structure in your pond hard cover? I'm talking metal, wood, just like underwater pipes and cables. Then your best shot at catching fish and not getting snagged is going to be the square bill or the shallow diving crankbait category. This style of crankbait, just like every other one in the medium diving and deep diving category, floats in the water column. So I'll give you a situation. If you're making a cast over a really shallow, snaggy area, and let's say you cast too far, that lure is floating on the top of the water, and all it takes is a very slow retrieve to get that lure past a snaggy area, and then once you're free of that situation, you can then begin your retrieve and not get snagged. That is the power of a floating lure. The next thing is that the shallow diving crankbait only dives from really 2 to 6 feet of water depending on the model, and so you are free to cast it out into the middle of the pond, where if your lipless crankbait had sunk in the water column and gotten stuck on something way out there, you couldn't retrieve retrieve your lure, but making casts out into unknown open water is usually fine, is usually safe because this thing can't dive deep enough to get snagged. And lastly, because it floats, if you do feel yourself hitting the bottom and then getting into an area that you probably could get stuck, a brush pile, a big rocky point, and you feel yourself kind of get stuck down there, you can stop the retrieve, let the bait float back up, and if you do get stuck, give your line some pops, kind of pop your rod tip, and that oftentimes can free the treble hooks, and of course, the lure will rise in the water column, and then you can begin your retrieve again. Now, something I've been using a ton in my bass fishing adventures because I helped build it is the Bass Forecast mobile app. The weather plays a huge role in both the movements of bass and their feeding patterns. And so if you don't understand what the weather is doing to your bodies of water, you may be ill-equipped to go on your pond, on your lake, and catch bass to the best of your ability. And Bass Forecast helps you understand all of that and puts it all in the palm of your hand. This app, based around a weather algorithm, can help you understand how well the fish should be biting on your body of water up to 10 days in advance with the Bass Forecast rating system. It can tell you what times of the day are best to fish based upon moon phase and season, what lures to throw based on, again, the season and the cover and structure available. And inside the app, I have created instructional videos in short vertical form teaching you how to fish every single style of lure. By downloading the app, you are helping the TRF channel continue to grow by supporting the sponsors that help out this channel. Now, let's talk about tip number 3, which is something I think a lot of anglers don't quite understand about crankbaits. And that is that you don't have to be actually touching the bottom with the crankbait in order to catch fish.
You're kidding me, right?
Are many crankbaits designed to be fished on or near the bottom? Yes, but do you have to throw them on the bottom? No. If we as anglers have no problem throwing a hard plastic jerkbait with treble hooks, which is basically just a skinny crankbait that instead of reeling back to us, we jerk back to us, if we can fish that in open water, not around cover, then why can't we also fish a crankbait, which is practically the same thing, just a different retrieve in the water column? If the visibility in your body of water is over 1.5 or 2 feet, you are perfectly fine to fish a crankbait, especially a shallow diving one, in a little bit deeper water, because if the fish are in an active feeding mood, they're gonna see it above their heads and they're gonna come up to eat it. So that may lead you to ask, what is the best crankbait to choose if I'm a bank fisherman? The shallow diving, the medium diving, or the deep diving, which we didn't even discuss in this video, because let me tell you, deep diving for the majority of pond anglers is not the right choice. Most ponds, like I said, look something like this, which do not have steep sloping banks directly off of where you're standing and casting. And so you're gonna get a deep diving, even a medium diving crankbait stuck very, very easily. Now, some ponds that look like this would be great for a deep diving crankbait because the bank slopes off to deep water quickly. But again, I don't teach the anomalies here on the channel that often. I try to teach for the majority of anglers, and unless you're fishing those deep, Corey style of lakes, the deep diving crankbait is a no. Now, the lipless crankbait does fit into any depth category, shallow, medium, or deep, but I think it really shines, it excels in that medium depth category. And so again, if you've got tons of aquatic vegetation or relatively open water with not many snags, a lipless could be a great choice for you. If you've got a great understanding of what your body of water is like down on the bottom, what the contours are like, and you are confident in using the countdown method to understand how far your lure is falling in the water column, then go for the lipless. It is a great, great lure to catch bass all around the country. I've caught some giants on this thing. But my choice for every bank angler out there, from beginner to advanced, for just catching bass anywhere, is going to be the square bill or the shallow diving crankbait. The features of this crankbait make it super easy and safe to fish in many bodies of water, and you can straight up catch some fish by just casting it out there and retrieving it straight back to you. Now, one last thing I think you'll discover when throwing crankbaits from the bank is that if your pond or lake has what's called snodgrass in it, there ain't no good crankbait choice for that body of water. I would suggest throwing something different. Now, one of my favorite crankbaits that I believe rivals the square bill crankbait in the shallow diving category is the Strike King Hybrid Hunter, and I have made an awesome full-length instructional video showing you guys why this lure is so special and why I have caught a 10-pound and many other giant bass on this crankbait. I will leave that video up here in the corner. My name's Tyler. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button and we'll see you guys over in that video.
You're kidding me, right?